So it's nice to meet you, sir.
Well, it's nice to do this. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I'm going to do a formal welcome. James Thompson, welcome to my podcast, Studio HFL.
Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
So, you know, this is a relatively new podcast, and I'm getting some nice traction out of everything. But the HFL is still kind of a mystery to a lot of people. Originally, it was higher, faster, louder
Ah,
because we're trumpet players, right?
right.
And I changed it a few months ago to Hear from Legends,
Oh,
which
that's very interesting.
which I think is more appropriate.
Well, in
And-
my case, it's the higher fats or louder part. It's whatever.
so, well, I first heard you, saw you live. I think it was '98 or '99 at an ITG conference in at UK down in Lexington.
Okay.
And you did a master class, and I remember you coached this young lady on Charlie A2. It's amazing what the mind remembers, right?
So I can sometimes can't remember my own kids' names, but I can
Well,
remember something specific. Yeah.
well, that's what I mean. You know, it's like the littlest thing sticks, but you can't remember where you left your car keys.
Right. Exactly.
But you know, that's when I first found out about you, and then I'm like, oh, this guy's the real deal, you know. And of course, you've had quite a career, and you
Well,
know, and
I consider myself lucky in a lot of ways. Really, really lucky. Um, uh, I grew up in Arizona, which at the time, back in the 50s, was not the cultural center of the universe. But we were blessed at that time, I have to say, with exceptionally good education for
hmm
people. My dad was an airman at a Luke Air Force Base, so we're not talking about making a lot of money.
right.
So I went to a public school that had an exceptional band program, and I got
hmm
really interested in it. And one thing led to the other. I started playing the trumpet, and it's just worked.
And there you go. So, you know, I was looking through, actually, I was on the Eastman website just a few minutes ago, just kind of glancing at your bio there. And it mentioned you were in Frankfurt.
Well, that's where I was born.
Well, my dad was Air Force, and we
Uh,
were stationed at Stuttgart. Even though it
okay.
was an Army post, he was Air Force and doing some administrative stuff there. So we lived, it was a place called Pattonville. And I don't know if
Was that after George Patton by any chance?
well, absolutely. um, but that and it doesn't exist any longer. You know, it's been made into public housing, and you know
Uh,
the. Um, but that was '70 to '74, and I would imagine you were in Germany.
oh, I was born in the first half of the last century.
Ah, okay, okay, okay.
Right after the war. Basically, my father was flying the Berlin airlift.
Oh my
So that's
goodness.
from Frankfurt to Berlin.
Yeah.
And ironically, I was born on the last day of the Berlin airlift when the Russians finally capitulated, which I think
Wow.
is kind of interesting.
Yes, it is. Um, so that would have been before the Air Force actually became its own separate branch.
No, it had been. It had transitioned, I think, under Truman.
Oh,
So,
okay, okay.
but right at that time,
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
born in '49. I think it
yeah,
happened a year or so earlier
yeah.
than that. Not
Have you
quite.
been back to Germany since?
Oh, quite a few times. I've gone
Yeah,
to either work and mostly to tour and work.
I've been back a couple of times, and I love it. To me, it's a beautiful country. I want to go visit again. There's so much history, obviously, aside from the war, right? There's so much to be seen and heard there.
Well, I've had experiences. I like I said, uh, what is it? The I'm trying to think of the player Segundo on that Saturday Night Live who says baseball has been very very good to me. Uh, uh, the trumpet has been very very good to me. I mean,
Yeah,
I've had some amazing experience. Um, I remember we were touring with the Montreal Symphony uh, right about 7 or 8 months before the Berlin Wall came down,
mm,
and we played in West Berlin and Frankfurt and these places. But we also played in East Berlin, but we couldn't go directly from West Berlin to East Berlin, so we had to do a concert in Scotland and then come back, and that was an experience to be behind the Iron Curtain at that time, and
Right.
it was pretty grim. It was pretty grim. The interesting thing about it is that while the Allies bombed the bejesus out of the western part of the city, the Russians just came in and with infantry. They didn't, and so a lot of the old buildings were still standing.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, with a lot of bullet holes in them still when
Right.
they were sockets. So there's a lot more interesting architecture
Mm-hmm.
on the eastern side. But I do remember playing at the Schauspielhaus, and beautiful, beautiful place. But then you see out on the street how people were just
Yeah.
just really just barely surviving and struggling.
Yeah. Well, even in the early 70s, and I remember visiting Checkpoint Charlie.
Uh-huh.
And of course, I was young and I didn't know what was going on.
One of the things I got a kick out of is that if you go to the main square right there past the gate, you'll see this huge radio tower. You probably remember it's a huge spire with a big globe on the top of it,
Mm-hmm.
and and it's right next to one of the churches in the main square there, and it's the globe is all glass, glass windows, and they call it the Pope's Revenge because the idea was that it was supposed to show the might of the Soviet Union, and technology towering over what was left of this. But apparently, if it's a sunny sunset, the sun opalesces that thing and it makes a cross, a big,
Oh.
a big cross on the front of that thing. So they call
Yeah.
it the Pope's Revenge.
That's the first time I've heard of that. That's fantastic. So let's jump forward a little bit. So I see some fishing poles back there. It looks like that's another way to pass the time.
Well, I dabble with it, and it's a nice way to get out and think.
Mm-hmm.
Don't bother me, I'm fishing. That kind
Yeah.
of thing. But yeah, I like to do that a bit. I'm still pretty active. I'm 71, and still ski. I ski, try as much as I can. I like to snow ski, and
Mm-hmm.
I play tennis 2 or 3 times a week, and try to keep active and so
Mm-hmm.
forth. And
What about with the? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And I still perform
Mm-hmm.
whenever the opportunity
Yeah.
arises.
So finding the motivation to practice this summer. Everybody struggled, of course, and unashamedly so. It's because we're all in that same situation where you look at the calendar
Yeah.
and there's nothing there. How have you managed to?
Well, it's kind of like being an old racehorse. You only start running when you hear the bell and the gate opens, and that's what you live for. I mean, that's the trigger.
Yeah.
In other words, if you got on your calendar, I got to play this. Now I know what to practice, and now in other words, everything. You think about it, it's all other determined.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of, well, I've got a lot of gigs. I got to do this and everything, and that's fine. But then, to finish the horse analogy, sometimes it's the pleasure is in just running, and sometimes the pleasure is in working on something that you never thought you would ever be able to do, and see if you can actually get to that point. Increase your triple tongue speed, your multiple tonguing, increase your range, increase your dynamic, the dynamic differences in contrast. Explore pieces that you've played before in a different way. In other words, take the piece out, or take a Charlier and really study it almost measure by measure, as if you were practicing one of the most advanced contemporary pieces, and really see if you can refine it to the whatever your model might be. If you're listening to Håkan play the
Right.
Charlie on Facebook or something, you can say, okay, what is he doing? What is he really doing? And it's not to copy it, but not to copy his performance, but to copy his approach. I had the great good fortune when I was in the Atlanta Symphony. We did the Olympics, as you know. We had the good fortune to stand up and play a solo in front of 3 million people
Oh my gosh.
at the opening ceremonies. But what was cool to me is that Håkan was in town with the Australian National Youth Orchestra, because they have the cultural component to the Olympics. There's always a cultural component, and so various countries are always represented. And Australia asked the youth orchestra to do it, and Håkan was going to play the Tomasi, and they put them in. They were putting the group in Rome, Georgia, and Rome's about 3 hours from Atlanta, and I get a call from Håkan. He says, could I come stay with you because I live close to downtown. Can I stay with you because it's out there? I said sure, and so we hung out. We played tennis. We swam, miniature golf, and played duets. And I heard him practice every day, and it was very revealing in the sense that I never heard him practice the Tomasi very loud, and he never played it fast. With all of the expression and everything that he wanted to put in it, but he never really played it fast. And I really appreciated that. And we sat down and played duets, and the one thing that struck me, and this is probably the same for all of the great artists, all the great athletes, which is his ability to concentrate was astounding. Astounding. And that's another part that you can work on whenever you're just doing things at home. Actually, one of the things that I like to teach is that you have a whole set of exercises that we all know, but you can bring any particular component of your playing to those exercises. If you're doing the fifth study of Clark, you can practice it so many ways. And most people just think, I want to learn the scale. I mean, that's right. And I want to get my fingers faster. Okay, admirable. But what about intonation on an F sharp major scale? Play the thing slowly. What about double tonguing? What about articulating it with different kinds of articulation? And here's the cool one. Can you go all the way through it? And I learned this from Gatala when I studied with Tegerwood. Can you go all the way through it with exactly the same front on every note? And if you then you find out where your mind slips, where you you're just kind of like, okay, I'm coasting here. What's next? You find out, and then you find out, hey, I'm not as disciplined in being in the moment. I call it present time, but being in the moment as I should be.
Right.
And so then when you ask about what things you can do, it's like you could do that.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, what we did, and I think this was good. We whenever this thing first came down last spring, I got calls from some of my colleagues in other schools and so forth, and they said, "You want to do a master class for me? I'll do a master class for you." And so I got a few people to do it, and I did it for a few people, and the students love it. And also you get a different perspective. And so, I mean, again, I think that is an advantage of Zoom in the sense that we could do that. I don't want to sound jaded, all right? But
no, you don't at all.
I don't want to get on an airplane and fly to some exotic place that sounds wonderful, that's 14 hours away on an airplane. Because for the most part, you'll get maybe 1/2 of a day to enjoy that one thing in your entire time. You have to get over jet lag, and then you got to get over jet lag again. Whereas you do this, you're there, and it's cheaper for the schools, and you get a lot out of it. I had.
Well, it opens up the access to so many more
Oh yeah.
artists,
Oh yes.
and you could have a master class a week where maybe you could afford one or two a semester,
Well, the
and
thing is,
if
they're
you do
going
the
to.
exchange that you're talking
See, the
about,
thing
then
is, it's going to be significantly less because you
yeah,
don't have room and board and transportation.
yeah,
So the fee could be better for the master, and uh, but it's still a lot cheaper for the school. So
yeah.
again, that's one of the advantages.
Hmm.
But like I said with Hokan, I mean, listening to him practice, it really kind of changed my. And I remember he returned the favor. I was teaching in Malmö, which is where he has a farm outside of Malmö, and he invited me for dinner at his place, and showed me really. I had a little sports car. I still do, but I had a sports car in Atlanta, and he just fell in love with it. It was a little 914 with a 6-cylinder engine in it. It had a Porsche engine in it, so it was fast. And I said, and it's hot. And I said, like, can we just take the regular car with air conditioning? No, I want to drive around in that. So I go and stay with him. The only reason he wanted me to come and stay because he had bought himself a sports car, and it's even more unusual than mine. It was a MGC. You've heard of an MGA and you've
Yes,
heard of an MGB.
right.
An MGC, and there weren't that many of them made, but they were 6 cylinders. That's what it was, and so would you like to take a drive? I said sure. We get in it. It's right-hand drive because it was from England.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting in the driver's seat, and he's blasting around these roads, and I keep grabbing for the steering wheel and trying to pump the brakes. It's like we had a good time.
Yeah.
But
So,
he was working on Ariel at the time, this piece by Gruber, which
mm-hmm.
could arguably be called the most difficult trumpet concerto ever written. It starts at a low register multiphonics, and then it gets hard.
and then it gets. Have you performed that?
Oh, I had a heart attack just looking at the part. He had the music sitting in his studio, and I was looking at it. And another thing struck me. He had notes to himself almost every other measure.
Wow.
And he literally learned the piece measure by measure. And he had told me, he says, well, I was supposed to perform this next month, but I told the folks that I really need another year on it. Now he can afford, yeah. And I mean, he could already play it, but he wanted to play it at the level that he could play it at, mm-hmm. that he wanted to play it at. Mm-hmm. In other words, when I hear him play, there is no technical issue that gets in the way of you hearing exactly what he is saying.
Well, and if he hasn't proven that through the Charliers during this, I mean, interpretation is one thing, but what a sound.
Yes, beautiful sound, but it goes beyond the sound. It goes into the emotion that he puts within the motion of the music, mm-hmm. and it speaks to people in a very common way, very clear way. And he wanted the same thing. That's why his contemporary stuff is accessible, because he actually makes it musical. Mm-hmm. And that's where a lot of young players that I hear today fall down. They're satisfied with their technical brilliance. Mm-hmm. And that's very admirable. I love it. But if I wanted it to be perfect, as fast as all possible, that it could possibly be, as high and as low and as technically difficult, I'd listen to a synthesized performance of it. Mm. But most people, you hear it on a synthesizer and you go, okay. Mm-hmm. You can hear it once. Or if you have a synthesized performance of something, it's to learn the piece. Mm-hmm. So that's not what we're really listening for. I mean, mm-hmm. I'm not discounting the ability of today's young trumpet players at all. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, I remember when I was in school, I studied with Roger Voisin, and a absolutely amazing musician that just happened to play the trumpet. Okay, I mean, it was all about music to him, and one of his colleagues, Harry Shapiro, was the personnel manager of the Boston Symphony. used to coach our quintet on occasion.
Mm.
You young fellas, you got all this technique and you play really, really fast, but I don't hear a lot of musical sound coming out here. You're not getting the sound that we used to, you know. And of course we're all going, you just sour grapes, right? Now I find myself saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, it takes time, right? I mean, you don't know what you don't know, and eventually you hope you get there, right?
Yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I find it fascinating that you admire Håkan, obviously, but there are people that think I want to sound like James Thompson,
Well, that's
right?
very flattering. I've always, oh, how do I put this? The lyrical aspect of the trumpet has always been something that I've been most interested in, and I've always been interested in that in the singing aspect of it, and I've always tried to pattern my playing after great singing. Whenever I play Mahler, I used to listen for hours to Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau sing.
Oh,
Rückert-Lieder, das Knabe Wunderhorn.
yes.
And Toten, Kinder Totenlieder. To listen to the way that he connects the notes and phrases, it just chills you down to your bones, and it's just and Jussi Björling, another great, you listen to him sing with that bravura style, the Italian stuff. That's what I always try to copy, and that's what I try to incorporate into my playing.
Mm-hmm. Sergei, departed from the trumpet repertoire a long time ago, and has been doing string repertoire, violoncello things, and vocal, right? Some of the Schubert or song cycles. And I love that because to me it gave us permission to do something other than Tomasi or Jolivet. But to really find the lyricism, you're right. If you go and you try to pattern your articulation and your phrasing after the lyrics, if you follow, right, it changes everything.
I was very fortunate when I was in high school. I fell in love with orchestra playing right there, and I had a good teacher, a very good teacher, who had gone to University of Michigan, and I got the Cliff Lilia style of cornet thing happening and so forth, and I took part in a young musicians competition with the Phoenix Symphony, for the Phoenix Symphony, and of course a pianist won it. I mean, they always do. It's either a pianist or a violinist.
Right.
And the first prize is to play a concerto with the orchestra. The brass prize was a scholarship to go to Interlochen.
Yeah.
So I got the best of the deal with that. There's no question about it. But one of the judges on the committee was a guy named James Kowalski, and he was the principal trumpet in the Phoenix Symphony.
Mm-hmm.
He'd studied in Chicago with Chikowitz and that whole crew, and he liked my playing. He says, "You want to come in and play assistant?" So at 16, 17 years old, I got a chance to play assistant in a professional orchestra, and I went to the acting department at my high school, and I said, "Do you have a set of tails?" I wore black pants. I had to go out and buy a white tie, but I got the tails from they'd probably been using a clown skit before that.
Right.
And I sat down, and I just had to play about 5 or 6 measures, and it was Don Juan.
Oh.
And I'm sitting there, and the orchestra starts, and I'm sitting, but here's James, and the principal horn at the time was a guy named Eugene Chasso, and he was from Chicago. He substituted with the Chicago Symphony quite a bit. He played regularly with the Lyric Opera. His brother was principal violin in the Chicago Symphony, and so I mean he was just a fantastic. He was in Phoenix. He was there because of respiratory issues. That's why he was there. So we were lucky. So I'm listening to this horn playing of, just a stellar class horn playing on one side, and these beautiful solos that James is playing on the other side. And I said, this is what I want to do. This is it. I got it. I know. What struck me is that one solo that goes bum bum ba-da-da-dee in piano. He played that, and I literally couldn't believe my ears. It sounded like he was playing forte far away. It was round, it was clear, it was not hesitant at all, except that it was pianissimo. So it didn't sound like what I was used to hearing guys play soft, usually with a lot of air in their sound. And this was like, oh, okay, I get it. I got a lot of work to do here.
So how long did you get to play in that group?
Well, I played 2 or 3 times. I got to play 2 or 3 times. Got to play Belshazzar's Feast, and then I also got to play one of the offstage parts in Pines. But I didn't realize, I heard this beautiful trumpet solo. He sounded phenomenal. But I was on one side of the backstage. I didn't even realize he was off stage. That's how little I knew what was going on. But it sounded just gorgeous. And, that's what kind of got me started.
So from there, you're now fixated with the orchestral playing. Did you just immediately seek out the path? I've got to study with this person. I've got to go to this school. I've got to take these.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting because I didn't know very much. Okay, I really didn't. But I did know when I was a freshman, there was a trumpet player who was a senior, outstanding player, and he had gotten a scholarship to go to New England Conservatory and stay with Roger Voisin. So I made up my mind. That's what I'm going to do too. And it was, it was the right choice because he gave me what I didn't have. He worked the things that I didn't have, and I'm forever grateful that we worked on a lot of technique. I had the sound that you talk about when I entered the conservatory, but I didn't have the technique. And so technique, sight reading, all of those things, and then putting it together in a musical way because he was extremely musical. So, but I forgot to tell you that one of the things that also was a prize for this young musicians thing, this was we got free tickets to go to this chamber music series that they held. This very, very rich lady had this amazing compound in the desert outside of Phoenix, and she had one rather large building for chamber music, and it was a situation where you would literally, it was like sitting in somebody's large living room. And I heard the Takesh Quartet, I heard the Juilliard String Quartet, I heard I think it's Dvorak, I think. I heard all these string quartets and string and piano things, and that taught me a lot too. What struck me about that is the incredible communication that these people have within with themselves, so that there's continuity in the balance. There's continuity of when somebody is saying something, somebody else is not, kind of thing. And I didn't know about it at the time, but I was absorbing that. And I think that's another good reason to listen to great string quartets.
Well, you say even Eastman may go to chamber groups.
Yeah.
This semester, there's that inherent value there where if it's a true chamber group, now in orchestra, I get it, you're still going to have a conductor, but the smaller groups, they're going to learn to listen, right? We do have chamber groups already, but this is going to be pieces like, I think Pulcinella is one of them that's on it. In other words, 25 players or something like that. Right. And we're still going to do our chamber, things. But yes, chamber music is. I remember. I've had a chance to work with a lot of good conductors, and a lot of not so good conductors. Let's talk about them, shall we?
I'm going to be discreet about that.
Yes, that's okay.
But I remember Klaus Tenstedt. when I also played in the National Symphony in Mexico, and one season, and a season there, a temporada, is only about, it's like from September to December. They call that a season. That's the fall season, and they'll have a spring season, and they'll have a summer season. They'll do it like that. So this one season, we did all the Mahler songs, all the Mahler symphonies.
Wow.
In one season.
Wow.
So every week was a Mahler, and we had guest conductors. And it was really, really cool. Really cool. One of my very favorite conductors, Eduardo Mata, was the music director at of that particular season. Amazing, amazing musician. But I do remember Klaus Tenstedt, we were doing Mahler 7. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to understand, this is chamber music. Now that's not something you would say about the Mahler 7. But you listen to the Nachtmusik in the middle, listen to the middle movements. It has to be played with the same kind of attention to your colleagues as if you were playing a chamber piece. I mean, how else are you going to hear a mandolin, for example? There's a mandolin in that. You know? So yeah, when he said that, it just kind of, and it's not just all bombast. You know, too often I hear trumpet players play really, really loud, and be very proud of that. But my emotional reaction to that is, you sound angry. Is that the way you want? You know, it's like, for example, the ending of Mahler 5. You know, that's it's supposed to be loud, but it's supposed to be joyous loud. It's, you know, guys, they put too much energy into the sound, and it just sounds like they're angry, and you're not giving your listener the right, you know, you're not giving them really what the music is about. And too often, young trumpet players are impressed with how loud somebody can play.
I think your, correct me if I'm wrong, but your Mahler 5 with Atlanta is something that I listened to when I first started doing orchestra auditions. That was my favorite.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And of course, you know, when you first start working on it, you only know the opening solo.
Right.
And then you start listening and you're like, oh, you know, the nuances here and there. You know, one of my favorites, you talk about the chamber, and, you know, right in the middle of Mahler 1, I think it's the third movement. It comes down to, it's just like 4 or 5 strings, or just the front row of strings. It's one of the most sublime moments of the symphony.
Well, he would do that. You know, he would. One of the things that bothers me about people interpreting Mahler is that they interpret Mahler, and what I mean by that is that he's very specific about what he wants. Do this here, do that there. Now, that doesn't mean you don't play unmusically, but he said this. You know, this is the emotional and dynamic approach I want for this. If you want to do any more, it just goes. Like, one thing that bugs me, I get it, but it's in the second, bum 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 bum. It says zurückhalten on that, and so I hear guys go, conductors go bum 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 bum. It's like, God, it's like pushing rocks up the hill. You know, it's like, this is a Sisyphus thing here. You know, but that's not what he means. He wants you to expand it a little bit. It's the same earlier in the piece, with a beautiful movement where you have this beautiful lyrical solo, and the whole trumpet section has a solo. Bum ba dee dum ba bum bum da da dee. Just that whole section, and it's got these hairpins in it. And so I hear guys go bum ba da da ba dum ba. Sounds like they're retching into their instruments. You know, that's not what they mean. That is a way of playing that used to be done on they're called Mittelstand orchestras in Germany. That's where the kind of the average players, they put a little bit of that. It's called Nachdrucken. You know, but if it's done nicely, it's almost vocal. In other words, the sound it's not a pointed sound. It grows. It's a little bit more like a football. And if you do it too much, it sounds maudlin. But if you do it right, it sounds. I want to use the word naive, but not in a negative way. You know, it's like it's innocent. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah. Where'd you learn that?
What?
Where'd you learn to look at things that way? Where that interpret it, looking at what Mahler's, paragraphs of instruction in the part, or not even Mahler, others.
Well, a lot of it came from listening to very, very good conductors, you know, talking to other sections, which means you should listen even when you're not being talked to, by the way. You might learn something. But we're just talking about Mahler here a little bit. I've grown to learn, and I teach this, that you can kind of compartmentalize Mahler's approach. He either writes a song, he writes a fanfare, we know, he writes a march, for sure, he writes a chorale. And then sometimes he will incorporate those concepts with a dance form called a Ländler. Bum, ba, yum, bum, bum, bim, bee, yum, bum, bum, dee, yum, bum. That's where the glissando, that's where that comes in. But it's got to be done, it's got to be done the way they do it. If you want to know what a Ländler is, watch the scene in The Sound of Music when the captain is dancing with Maria for the first time. That's a Ländler. It's a very stately dance. But for example, if you're playing one of these melodies, bum 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 bee, that's right out of his song cycle. Morgen ging über Feld, and that's where you really want to sound like Dieskau. Okay, you want to sound like him right there. Then he puts in a few bird calls, but so you can use a little vibrato like he would, not a lot, but it's a little bit. So vibrato there. Chorales, not so much. It can have a warm sound, but a little bit straighter. Fanfares are obvious, but the marches that he writes are different. I mean, he writes marches at different tempos. Like the opening of Mahler Fifth is a march.
Right.
It's a Trauermarsch. It's you can just see the caisson with the body, being taken down a cobblestone street kind of thing. But then he writes obviously faster ones. But again in the second, that's bum bum bim dun dun. So it's very slow, but it's also a march. And then that you play almost totally ice cold, So I've come to kind of equate certain aspects, facets of the way that he writes and the styles with certain type of musical approach. So that's what I mean by that. And it just took years and years and years of playing those things to start to realize it.
Yeah. Well, you've played in some really fine orchestras, a lot of great conductors, good sections along the way, I would imagine. Great supporting cast. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So when's the last time you played in an orchestra?
The semester before the COVID thing. I have I've been going up and playing with the Quebec Symphony on occasion when they need somebody to come in and fill in for first trumpet, which they do on occasion, and that's a blast because I love going back to Quebec, and Quebec City is even cooler than Montreal, and very, very good orchestra, and I love the conductor. He is somebody that I really love to play for. His name is Fabien Gabel, and Fabien is now getting he's creating quite a good reputation, quite a good career. His father played in the Paris Opera. He's a trumpet player. So when I play for this guy, I'm playing for a trumpet player who knows what I'm doing. So, and I remember we played 2 years ago. We did Alpine Symphony, and I thought I'll never get a chance to play that. I've played it 2 or 3 times, but up until this time, I thought I'll never, that's when I'll never play again.
Right.
And I got a chance to do it. And the fun thing about it is that I brought more of my knowledge to it than the first time when I was just happy to get through it.
Yeah. So I remember hearing you make a comment, and I don't remember, but somebody had asked you about leaving Atlanta. And it was along the lines of, I'd rather leave 5 years too soon than 5 years too late. And I thought, first of all, you have to be, I respect that a lot, because you know that, you don't want to outstay your usefulness, I suppose.
I don't want to be one of those trumpet players like one of those Spanish matadors who's being dragged out of the arena with blood in his hand. But more than that, I had a good time in Atlanta, and I got a chance to record a bunch of music that I would not have had a chance to do in Montreal. Mm-hmm. I can say Montreal played Mahler extremely well, Strauss extremely well. It was a German orchestra before it was a French orchestra. Mm. All the conductors before Dutoit were German, including Zubin Mehta was a conductor up there. Mm-hmm. But we had the reputation of doing French music, and I had a chance to do all of this this other music in Atlanta. Plus, the orchestra was going on tour quite a bit, and my wife was in the orchestra, and we had 3 kids, and we were on the road 2 months a year, and the kids were really suffering. So Atlanta gave us a chance to be in one place. Of course, then we immediately went on tour the first week, the first year that I was there. But just we did from that time on. Did very short things, like to Florida and to New York and stuff. But I really kind of I had been teaching my whole life. I've been teaching since I was in high school. Mm. Well, actually, junior high school, because I remember my band director said, "This kid doesn't play very well. Why don't you give him a couple of lessons?" I'm like 11, right? And I said, "Sure." He says, "So charge him 50 cents." I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And so I started teaching this kid, and after about 15 minutes, he started crying. And I thought, I don't think I'm doing this right. And from that point on, I started really being interested in how to make it work, because all of my directors were great. They were, and why was this not working? So I got interested in the teaching aspect of it. And I've been teaching. I taught at McGill University for 15 years. I taught at the National Conservatory in Mexico. I did some teaching in Atlanta, but mostly from home. But
have you raised your rates?
Yeah.
From 50 cents to...
I still don't charge, privately, I still don't charge as much as a lot of people do, which people say I should, but somebody once said, if you want, one of my bassoon colleagues told me this when he started studying with the preeminent bassoonist in Los Angeles many years ago. He says, "I'm going to take you on as a student." And the guy says, "Well, how much do I pay you?" He said, "Nothing." "What do you mean?" For what I know, you can't pay me enough.
Oh, wow.
But if you do the work, you're worth it.
Wow.
And I thought, boy, that's arrogant, but that kind of puts the cards on the table, doesn't it?
Well, I had a similar experience. As a junior in high school, I started studying with Vinnie DiMartino.
Ah, yeah. I love
and I sat down in a studio. I mean, he... that may be the most nervous I've ever been in my entire life, was that first lesson with him. But my dad had given me some money to take with me. I didn't even discuss a fee beforehand. And we finished the lesson. I said, "Mr. DiMartino, how much do I owe you?" He goes, "As long as you practice, lessons are free." I'm blown away, So guess what I did? I practiced. I practiced. Yeah. And I went back, and studied with him, and then eventually ended up at UK studying with him there. But what an impression that made.
He's a very, very generous man.
Absolutely,
and
yes.
He absolutely loves playing the trumpet. Although he will say, trumpet playing is what I do between meals.
He does love his food. And he's a good cook.
Yeah, I love Vinny. So I don't want to go on too long here, but I got to tell you, we were at this international competition. We were invited artists at this international competition in Kiev, Ukraine, and I was kind of excited about going. You know, I mean, it's kind of a cool place and everything. And I get on the plane in New York, and Laurie Frink is sitting next to me, and we're flying, and then we get on this plane, and we get to I think Frankfurt. I think we flew into Frankfurt. That's a main hub, and then we get on this Flot Russian jet. You know, one of those Russian. Oh my God! The thing sounded like it was taking off. The seats are all rattling and everything. We're gonna die. We're all gonna die here. So that kind of set the stage for the fact that when we got there, of course, my luggage didn't show up. It ended up somewhere else. So for a week, I had no change of clothes, and I had to play a recital with Vinny. And at that point. It was great because Doc Schutzer was there. I mean, everybody was that. All of the Eastern European guys were there. It was kind of dedicated to him. And yeah, we go down for breakfast, and well, the first day I get into my room, and I'm going to go to sleep. And they put us in the athletes' palace. You know, now why we weren't in the main hotel, they said this is much better. You know, because the athletes are treated a lot better. So I get in there, and it's freezing. It's like the first of November, and it's freezing. So I get up and I turn the knob on the hot water heater on the side of the radiator, and nothing. So we go down. I finally go downstairs, and I see everybody else is down, and we're trying to, in broken Ukrainian, trying to figure out what's going on. He said, "Can you turn on the heat?" Well, no, it's central heating. Well, then just go down and go down and turn it on. No, I can't. It's central heating. So this went on for about 15 to 20 minutes until our official interpreter shows up, and she talks. She says it's central heating. And she said that. She says, "No, you don't understand. It's central heating for the city. The city will turn on the heating on the 9th of November."
Oh my goodness!
So we come down, and then you come down the next morning, and everybody's singing loud, looking pretty hard boiled, and you know, the food wasn't very good. You know, and Laurie says, "You want some filet mignon for breakfast?" Somebody had opened a tin of the fish, you know, just like tuna that you give your cat, you know, like
right.
That.
Right.
And then we're all going, "Oh, this is." And then this one Swedish guy, we had a guy who was a Swedish trumpet mime that was doing a performance. He comes downstairs and he sits down and says, "I tried to go to sleep with the shower on, hot, but I just couldn't do it. I just kept falling down." That's the kind of day. So anyway, we had a hell of a good time there, and I remember lovely people, and we did this concert together with. I did this concert with Vinny, and we had this horrible pianist that kept rushing and dragging, and we're looking at each other trying to get this thing to happen together, and it's just we barely got through it. And from that point on, we became pretty good friends because we had just survived a near fatal blow from that performance.
Yeah. Well, Vinny's easy to be friends with, isn't he?
He sure is. He really is.
I
got him to do one of the masterclasses for me.
Yeah. So, well, this has been a lot of fun.
Well, I hope that gave you some interesting information.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, and I look at this, honestly, these days as like, you know, I could just keep all this to myself and not put it out there. But I think a lot more people are going to enjoy it as much as I did.
Well, that's great. You know, like I said, playing trumpet, for Vinny, playing trumpet is what he does between meals. But he truly loves it, and I do too. But I do it because I like the people. Whenever people ask me, do you miss playing? Don't you miss playing in Montreal? Don't you miss playing these other orchestras? I said, not really, but I do miss the people. You know, because you you do create a family if it's a positive orchestra. You do create a kind of a family atmosphere. And I've been lucky in that respect because there are orchestras that are not like that, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I can say I miss my colleagues. I miss playing in orchestra, and our entire fall season is canceled. So, it may be January before.
I know.
And making music, you're right, making music is one thing, but it's being around the people that makes it.
Yes. Not having clean clothes for a week and the people still like you. See, I mean, you can't buy that.
So, well, I really appreciate the time today. Thanks for the time and sharing everything.
My pleasure.
I wish you good health, and I hope it all goes well for you.
And you too. We'll be
thanks
back.
very much.
We'll be back. Okay.
All right. Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.